Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Neil Oliver channel. I'm just about to deliver another monologue, but please let me tell you how to support the podcast. Go to Neil Oliver on patreon.com and sign up, part of some money. In that way, you'll be helping me to keep doing what I've always been doing on here. And in return, you get early access to all content, exclusive access to some content. We also have a sponsor on this channel. Gold Bullion Partners, to be precise. They are in the business of buying and selling gold and silver, the actual stuff, the bars and the coins. And the guys that run the company are a good bunch. They know what they're talking about. And they say, and I quote, owning gold and silver is about wealth preservation, safety and control, not speculation. So if you want to consider freeing yourself from the system, have a chat, as I have done, with the people at Gold Bullion Partners. They'll talk you through it, person to person, and find out if it's right for you. And the links are down below this video. Okay, let me get stuck into what's on my mind at the moment. We don't have democracy in Britain. I feel able to state that as a blunt fact. Challenge if you will, but we do not have democracy in Britain, not in any meaningful sense. It's just a D word. If, as I do, you mean the people ruling themselves, which is democracy, then I suspect strongly that we have never had democracy in Britain. The absence of it is nothing new. It was never there. What we've had is an illusion, a sleight of hand performed by those in power, who are the same people the world over. But I also say, which is a slight twist on it all, that we have no justice in Britain. I'm less sure about when justice was undone, when justice went away. I think it's possible, I think it's credible that there was justice in Britain for a period of time, maybe a very long period of time, but it's absent now. I'm not quite sure when it went away. In the wake of the Southport murders in Britain, an atrocity in which 3 very young children were butchered at a dance class, and 8 other children and 2 adults were seriously wounded. A 40-something woman called Lucy Connolly put up a post on social media. She called in the heat of the moment for mass deportation of immigrants and for the burning of the hotels used to house them. Within hours, she deleted the post. She took it down, but it had been seen by, I think, about 300,000 people. Seen, not liked, seen. And she was charged. She went to court and she admitted wrongdoing. And she was sentenced to 31 months in jail, so 2.5 years. There was an appeal on her behalf, which failed. And she remained behind bars, where she still is. Although apparently there are news reports that she's likely to be released under some or other conditions in the weeks ahead. But since her conviction and jailing, shorter sentences were handed down to men convicted of actual violence, including and here I must say only the R word, men accused of the R word. And I have to say R word rather than the word, because if I say it, then I suspect this content would be taken down. But it was the R word in relation to children. Shorter sentences than Connolly got for her post. More topically, in that the judgment has come down more recently, a Labour councillor, a guy called Ricky Jones, who last year attended a protest in Walthamstow, and during a speech to the gathering there called for, and I quote, his words not mine, quote, disgusting right-wing fascists to have their throats cut. And he said that while simultaneously drawing his finger across his own throat. Now, just last week he was found not guilty of inciting violent disorder and he walked free from court. There are several lessons to be learned from the comparison and contrast. What happened to Lucy Connolly and what happened to Ricky Jones under the auspices of what is described as justice in Britain in 2025. Connolly's a white woman. Jones is a man of colour. Now, this simple fact, which ought, in the context of justice in Britain, which has the emblem of Lady Justice, a statue, eyes blindfold, and weighing the scales of justice without seeing, right? But this simple fact matters. The colour, in the context of British so-called justice, where that other R word, which is racism, is a dog whistle, summoning righteous indignation left, right and centre. Lucy Connolly's anger was focused on immigrants, mostly brown people, outsiders, new to Britain and arriving by the thousands, most of them demonstrably young men in the small boats that are shepherded across the English Channel every day by the authorities notionally tasked with protecting the British border. Ricky Jones, was calling for the cutting of the throats of what he called disgusting right-wing fascists, so that it was reasonable to infer he meant the indigenous population of Britain, still mostly white people, if you want to count the numbers. But it's in relation to the application of British so-called justice that we get to the more essential matters. Connolly, she of the social media posts, pled guilty. She helped herself, as it were, to summary justice. She took the short path to her destiny, which was a place in a cell. Ricky Jones pled not guilty, by contrast, and was, most unusually now in Britain, in which more than 90% of cases never come in contact with a jury. They're dealt with by judges alone and magistrates and whatever. Ricky Jones was found innocent by that process. Now, who knows what would have happened to Lucy Connolly, if she too had sought the deliberation of a jury, if she had been advised to, or by her own volition had chosen to plead not guilty, which is part of process. But one of the lessons of her experience would seem to be that pleading guilty in the Britain of 2025 is a mug's game. The justice system in Britain is rushing faster and faster with every passing day towards a situation in which trial by jury is a thing of the past. It doesn't happen. As I've said on this channel over and over, trial by jury, by which I mean trial by jury as originally instituted in the dim and distant past, which is no majority verdicts, no direction, far less bullying from a judge. That trial by jury is the means by which a randomly selected set of people, deemed to be living lives similar to that of the accused, that's what is meant by a jury of your peers, people that can identify with and empathise with the kind of life that you're leading. They decide, using only their consciences, not only the guilt or innocence of the accused, but the justice or not, the fairness or not, you might say, of the legislation that was used to bring the accused to court in the first place. And that's the more important part of trial by jury. The plight of the individual is important, of course it is. But more important is for that little parliament, that jury of people, to decide if the legislation, the law, is right, is suitable, if it makes sense. Say it once and say it loud. It's by such trial by jury as I've just described, and only by such trial by jury, that the people of Britain govern themselves. If that's there, you've got democracy. If it's not there, you don't. Without trial by jury, the state, in the form of the so-called government, frames the legislation, employs, pays the judges sitting in judgment without reference to the people, and so determines the punishment. That's a closed loop. That's the state saying what's right and wrong, employing people to decide what's right and wrong, and then applying the punishment for whatever's been decided to have been done wrong. That's a positive feedback loop. It's textbook tyranny, in which the people are slaves and the state is all powerful above them. What we're seeing in Britain now, what's being imposed on the people living here, is what has been described accurately as two-tier justice. two-tier justice. I often find it vital to contemplate the precise definition of a word. It's so important to be precise. Without this effort, words become, well, little more than sounds that we might mimic in the manner of mynah birds. You know, having heard them before, used in certain contexts, so that you just perform the same trick, so that you feel that you belong to the flock. Justice, the word, is properly descriptive of the quality of being fair and just. It's about moral soundness and conformity to truth. Think about that. Justice is conformity to truth. The word just, the first bit of justice, has been around in common usage since the 14th century, and it means, according to the dictionary of etymology I consulted, morally upright, righteous in the eyes of God. It also means equitable, fair, impartial in one's dealings, fitting, proper, conforming to standards or rules. You get that? Conforming to rules. A bit like in a game, so that the rules have to apply equally to every player. You can't have some players getting away with things and other players being pinned by the referee and sent off. That's not fair. That's playground logic. Connolly and Jones are only pawns in the game being played by the corrupt state. It doesn't matter whose side you're on. Connolly and Jones are equally pawns of the state, more than anything else. Words like fair or impartial do not apply in this context, far less a noble concept like conformity to truth. Connolly and Jones are pawns in the game in which the powerful do what they always do and always have done, which is divide the people and set the different groups in deadly hate the one against the other. The flood of outsiders, and that's not a pejorative, outsiders, people coming into Britain from outside, the flood of outsiders into Britain is the intention and the work of the state. It's happening because it's being made to happen. The outsiders are arriving from countries that, I don't know if you've noticed yet, Britain has helped the US and other allies either to bomb into ruins or in which to instigate regime change in favour of the United States and her allies. So it's hardly surprising if many of those arrivals, more pawns, obviously, actively loathe Britain. Why wouldn't they? So with their arrival, you have two groups right away. Two groups good to go, insiders and outsiders. So you further stir the pot by highlighting different skin colours. Or you do if you're the malevolent, Machiavellian actors at the invisible level, those shaking the ant jar. You stir the pot, for example, by highlighting differences in skin colour. And you do that by treating different people differently. You do likewise with different religions, different ideologies, different cultures, different attitudes towards women, the place of women in society. And so having stirred the pot thusly, you've got even more divisions, more open fronts in the nascent civil wars. And then the state openly, blatantly treats different groups in different ways. It's not equitable. There's no fairness. There's no blindness on the part of Lady Justice. Specifically speaking, what we're seeing now, indeed the reality in which noses are being rubbed, any valid idea of justice has been set aside. In the same way that democracy isn't here, justice is not here. Instead, and the tactic is as old as it is obvious, the effective tactic applied by those who would not defend and promote a given state, a given nation, but on the contrary would undermine and so destroy that state or nation. That most effective time-served tactic is to punish or absolve, not on the basis of justice that's born of fairness, but simply and blatantly so as to enrage and provoke the people looking on, by the application of obvious unfairness. And in so doing, those that would destroy the state and the nation incite themselves the sort of violence that happens when people pushed beyond breaking point are apt to take the law into their own hands. In the short term, the lesson to be learned from the different ways in which Lucy Connolly and Ricky Jones were treated is that no one in their right mind should ever plead guilty. Never plead guilty. Always insist as far as possible on what used to be called due process. Connolly pled guilty and she's behind bars. Jones is on tape calling for the cutting of throats, miming the action with his finger, and he walked free precisely because a jury, despite the evidence, decided not to convict. But more broadly, the lesson of Britain now, Britain the Petri dish, Britain the jar of ants shaken to murderous rage by the deliberate Machiavellian machinations of rich, powerful people who want to see Britain gone, who want to see every country gone, national borders, in almost every case, erased. That class, that sect that loathes and regards with utter contempt the indigenous people of Britain, that loathes and regards with utter contempt anyone and everyone who feels a sense of belonging and a sense of ownership of a place. The lesson of Britain now is that all the pawns born and raised here, maybe the sons and daughters of uncounted generations of ancestors born and raised here, and the pawns being shipped here by the boatload through a border that stops British citizens for passport control, but that ushers undocumented strangers straight to their taxpayer-funded new lives. But all the pawns are being played with by those who would see an end to almost all nations and the creation of a homogeneous mob of impoverished herd animals denied privacy and freedom of any sort. We have no democracy in Britain. We have no meaningful justice in Britain. But, and it's a ginormous but, democracy and justice are real. Democracy and justice can and do exist in the natural universe. More and more of us know and understand what democracy is, what justice is, what they really are. And ironically, this knowledge and understanding is being actively revealed because of the anti-human ideology being pushed by the rich and powerful. In the old book, it says that when it comes to the evil, by their fruits you shall know them. Well, look around. The fruits of the evil are plain to see in the perpetual war, the propaganda and the fear porn, setting every person against every other, in the yawning chasm between the haves and the have-nots. By their fruits you shall know them. We do know them.